Hi, it's Susan from Worldpeacefull, and I have to say that this video I'm about to do is actually quite hard for me to do. I've already just done a few attempts, which is very unusual for me. Normally I just do one video and that's it. How to articulate this particular subject matter from the perspective of a peacemaker, which I am, I have to be very, very careful with this because this could disrupt popular narratives in respect of creating the enemy. Finding the right words for this is actually quite difficult. So I may go silent from time to time as I try to connect to the creation of the enemy, which is underlying the approach in war zones and justification for violence. In the civil society, violence is without doubt against the law. Within the military forum, it has been normalised that we need to defend ourselves, therefore we may need to use the use of force. We may create that theatre of war in other countries. It's not the traditional warfare we had in the Second World War, where there were armies facing other armies, where the Geneva Conventions, the rules of law, were clear. The rules of engagement. I'm just going still for a moment as I try to feel this out more clearly. It was more simple in respect of that is the enemy, I fight that enemy. Today it is not at all simple because militaries are moving into civilian areas. The enemy is not so clear. They tend to blur in, like we saw with the Vietnam War. The Americans didn't know who was Viet Cong, who wasn't. And so many civilians got caught up in the crossfire, and they, without creating any possibility of being attacked, they would just kill a civilian, thinking that they could possibly have a bomb or whatever. So the fear drove that violence, which is, if I transpose that into a civilian setting, not dissimilar in respect of people murdering each other, although it's very, very small percentage that do it in a civil society. In cases of violence, most violence is conducted by people that you know, believe it or not. The stranger danger idea is actually not the dominant situation. So going back to the military, and I want to premise this by saying I'm not an expert in military matters. I tap into it like any citizen. I've had some training in the peace and non-violence area, and I might just go there first as I enter into this very hot subject, because I know it is. I'm a Rotary Peace Fellow, and I've studied over in Bangkok. And our work there was theoretical and practical. So we looked into what is conflict. We looked into the different personalities involved in conflict, the different approaches to conflict, how people think differently in conflict situations. We saw case studies of military oppression in various countries. I won't go into naming those countries, but let's just say I'm just giving you a bit of a feel. Had a look at counterterrorism and how the military map out the various players in those conflicts, those supplying the weapons. We've also got the political angle, where it can serve a political group to create a conflict. There's a lot of manoeuvring that goes on in order to maintain power, because these conflicts are arising out of the reaching for power, or the maintenance of power, or the expansion of power. We call it expansionism. The traditional dividers in respect of the world were the communists versus capitalists. I won't say democratic because I no longer see it that way. I'm starting to see more clearly in respect of those dividers. But what I've come to understand today is that it really wasn't about communism or capitalism. It was about power. This is control. So the whole setup in any sort of creation of an enemy is about power. It's clearly about that because if people were seriously interested in resolving the conflict, not only would you go into dialogue, but you would go into conflict resolution, and then you would go into healing, because those who have an understanding of the trauma that conflict creates, if you don't want it repeating, you have to resolve and heal that conflict. You also have to rebuild a country, because what's often happened is countries have been decimated, people have walked out, others have come in to profit from that destruction, and they've also gained control by having had a lot of money injected back into either that economy, or they have been paid a lot of money to reconstruct. So there's a lot of dynamics, and I guess what I learned as a peace fellow was how to look at those different actors in the conflict. They've all got their own perspectives. They'll all be arguing that their case is right. They will concoct a story. Now we've got PR spin that comes into spinning stories for the public, as distinct from, a small percentage of investigative journalists, but I wouldn't say that the media predominantly represents the truth. It doesn't. For the most part, propaganda goes out, press releases go out, information is managed, the public don't hear the full picture. They end up with a biased viewpoint because that government's in an alliance with another government, and anyone that comes in with a competing narrative can be seen as part of the enemy, because they're weak. See, it's all about strengthening and weakening is what I've understood. So they seek to weaken that opposition through propaganda, ensuring that no one feels that they can safely speak up with a competing narrative which would rebalance the understanding of the conflict. Labels get applied to those in order to stop them from speaking up. So dissenters, whistleblowers, reporters, media suppression, all this sort of thing is part of that war. And of course, it clashes up with democratic values where we say freedom of speech, we don't see ourselves at war. The public has no understanding of the power dynamics that are happening in its name. Not to protect democracy, but to protect power. Not to protect communism, but to protect power. Not to, protect sort of growth, economic growth, but to maintain profit. I'm pausing there because I was trying to find ways to word that, because I see the corporate players very much actively engaged in this. The financiers are engaged in this because they're funding both sides of the wars. We've got agendas. It's like a cake, layers of agendas. But there's a compartmentalisation to all of these conflicts in that you get a need-to-know basis. We've heard that before, haven't we? But what that does is it controls knowledge so that people don't, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, would be a good way of wording that. So you might be acting out of innocence as a party to that side, let's say, but you won't know the full story. So you'll be fed a story that you're to fight or to participate on this basis. This is the purpose you're serving. This is the objective you're after. And yet that objective will change at different levels of that cake, let's say. At the very top, both sides are being orchestrated in the conflict. It's called disruption, and we're hearing this word more and more, but I see disruption has always been the case. I think we've always been disrupted, depending on what country you're in. I mean, Australia's about to get disrupted, and so is the US and UK. The Western countries are about to get disrupted, but that's in an IT sense, which is another form of conflict, another form of social engineering, another platform from which those who wish to shape the world in their view can, if you like, communicate that, but in a way that serves us on some level. Because often you'll see humanitarian labels attached, public benefit, public interest is all attached to these things, but really we're not analysing or critiquing deeply enough in order to understand what's really going on. There's a lot of conflict in our world. The media focuses on various conflicts, and then we think that's the whole world. Well, it's not. There's lots of conflicts going on in lots of places. And what these competing interests are doing are trying to rebalance something that they feel is out of balance. This is why this gets excited, and I don't mean it excited in a positive sense. I'm just going to sit for a moment because I kind of feel to go still. Feeling I get is that all war is futile and it's a zero-sum game, all of it. Even our corporate wars, they're all based on military strategy. The war within, where we're trying to feel power because we feel powerless, and this is the human condition. The war's been going on for centuries. It's a male game. It's where men feel they've got some control over things that they feel are out of control, probably, is the sense I get. But there's massive pain created through their pain. And it's funny, when I do go still around, even surveillance and things like that, I do sense a lot of pain. It's not my own because I've already been through my own experiences and I've cleared a lot of that. So it's not mine. It's definitely a connecting to the pain of others. And I'm usually very sensitive in that way. I've always cared about other people. And whenever I've felt pain, I've always imagined others so that I could deepen my empathy. Because the great disconnect here is the lack of empathy towards the suffering of humanity. In this scenario I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to be talking about military issues. I'm also going to be talking about Guantanamo Bay. But ultimately, the real theme that this flushes up is the suffering of humanity. The games we play with ourselves in order to deny our role in the creation of that suffering. We always have an excuse as to why it's important to make people suffer, to punish them, to do horrendous things to them. And then on the other hand, we say we believe in democratic principles because that's the narrative that's been used as why it's a good thing. And yet we are not living that democracy. We're not living those values. I've been re-listening to Scott Ritter, who I recorded. He was a senior weapons inspector in Iraq. I recorded him many years ago. I think it was 2004, I think it was. And he was talking about the war in Iraq. And he was also bringing up some very important issues about, are you a consumer or are you a citizen? He was talking about the apathy in the citizenship area, that we sit back and we go, oh, I've got no power. I've heard others say the same thing. Got no power. We can't do anything. These are the narratives we're all taught. He also talked about war as horrendous. He also talked about the lies of his own government, lies of our own government. And I don't think this is a particularly spectacular statement to make. I think most people feel this these days. There's a lot of people who are learning more about events that have transpired and recognising that they weren't told the truth. Because what the truth does for us is it gives us a bit of a clarity about these things, in which communities' money is being spent. We have a right to know what has been done in our name or through nationalism, through the nation state. We also need to know whether it's truly in our interests or not. And what are those interests? Well, keeping safe for a start. Also the fact that civilians in other countries, I don't want to see civilians in other countries being targeted as part of the enemy because they're seen as combatants, because somehow they've been involved, or charges have been concocted about them being involved. So going back to that idea of violent conflict in civilian areas, it's fraught with grey areas in respect of, can you justify the killing of a family? You've just blown up someone who you've targeted on a phone. 50 other people were standing next to them. And I've actually seen footage like this. I saw this years ago in respect of the war in Iraq. It was an Iraqi doctor who got the footage. This was in Canberra. It was horrific to see people just been obliterated like this. And it's like, well, okay, well, surely that's murder. Now, this is what they're grappling with. And I would say that there is another war going on in respect of making it legitimate to target civilians. Now, what happens when this comes into societies where people are dissenting or raising truth like I'm doing? Do I get targeted? I already know I'm targeted in respect of surveillance, certainly. In a truly democratic society, I wouldn't be targeted. It would be going, okay, she's just having her say. But where democracy is not really being lived, you get targeted, and then you get tarred as potential enemy, and risk management or counter-terrorism will seek to change you into that enemy to justify behaviours. That's how we play mentally with this. If we go into truth, if we come from a base of values that we truly believe in, then we will question ourselves. You see, that's what values does. Universal values, I'm talking about the values we all share as humans. If I really sit with values, then I'm going to go, well, is it true what I'm believing? Because I'm now negatively looking upon this other in a way that diminishes them. Now, the minute I do that, I'm projecting something negative within me onto them because I'm not able to own my part in it. This is now conflict resolution that I'm talking about. This is the psychology behind the projection of power. I don't want to acknowledge that I've lied, that I've created a story in order to justify violence against that other. Now, there will be arguments along the lines of, this is legitimate defence. I've been attacked. I need to defend myself. People do need to defend themselves. I'm not against the defence. Obviously, for me, I always hesitate on violence because I can see it as a escalating problem. For me, because I hurt and then I turn to hurt you, does that make me feel better? Well, no, we both end up hurting. Well, you might say, well, I got revenge. That's great. And I'm moving away from the West and I'm moving into the Middle East where revenge is it's not just in Middle East, actually. It's often come out of tribal societies because I've seen it in Indigenous as well, where revenge. But, some might then say, well, no, there's revenge here too. But there are in cultures very strong senses of revenge. And it's linked to manhood, that if I do not retaliate, I'm not a man. It's also linked to vulnerability. If I don't come out aggressively, and you can see it in nature, you have to look at, I just got the image of a lizard, when it's putting out its fan when it's angry because it's scaring off. It's actually using it as a bluff. The Maori, kamete, blah. See, that was the war dance. Don't mind me. To scare off that other, scare them. And this is the fear that men create amongst themselves, because men are scary to each other as well. And then they arm up, and now they're getting sophisticated weapons where they can kill lots of people. We've got nuclear weapons. I'm just scanning in my mind the weaponry. Scary. And then you've got leaders on top of that pile who might do anything with those weapons. It's a miracle that we haven't had a nuclear holocaust on the planet, to be honest, given the mentality of some of the leadership across the planet. We're also dealing with unipolar power, where there's one powerful country like the US. When the Russians tended to lose power economically, they lost power. They're very dependent on commodities. So that bipolar world order, which was called the balance of power, they tried to balance the power. This was through the de-escalation of nuclear weapons. So the non-proliferation treaty, the constant reviewing of what each has. There's a certain amount of openness in that as well, in order so the other side doesn't get it wrong. That's why I also do videos, is to make sure people don't get it wrong. So if you're going to assess me through my own words. I believe in transparency. It's very important. I'm just going still for a moment as I contemplate war, and I'm going to talk about these matters, but they're going to be in the next 2 videos. I'm feeling to go with this flow right now. And it's the violence of men I'm tuning into, and the women that support it, women who are in ignorance supporting it, society being taught that it's fine. So just bear with me whilst I connect to violence and why we do it. See, pain comes up immediately. We're in pain. In our culture too, I want to talk a little bit about the Western culture, in my experience of those who are not from the Western culture. What I saw was, in our society, we're very connected to materialism. We identify ourselves on the basis of what we have. We work, we're told we all have to work, and it wasn't always the case. Certainly in my lifetime, when I was young, women were still at home, starting to go to work, but there wasn't this great emphasis on everybody working. Today, everyone has to work. There's not much space for children. There's very little space for community. It's like you get old and you can have in a community. Like, people aren't allowed to retire early. So we're really losing the very powerful and enjoyable culture of community that we had, which is like family. That's what nurtures us. There's most definitely an attack on the family at this time, the breakdown of the family, because people are controllable when they're not in families or communities. People are getting more isolated. There's more mental health issues because of that breakdown. We tend to demonise the lower socioeconomic. I'm just bringing all this in because the vulnerability of those who get attacked. Typically, we see it in those who are poor, who are seen as the losers in society, and then we've got those who, parade their wealth. And there's great people in both, and there's annoying people in both. So I'm not creating any hard and fast divides, saying they're good and they're bad. No. We're human, and we divide on a whole range of lines. And my work as a peacemaker is really to look at where we unite, in truth. So I'm not really into demonisation. So even when I talk about military, I'm not really interested in demonising the military because, you know, that doesn't add to the quality of a discussion. It's really to reach out to them, not just them, but the governments that market them and the companies that are in behind it who are profiting from them. And the outcome of all of that in respect of the human suffering that it creates, and that's really the theme that I'm feeling moved to talk about, is the human suffering that is justified away. We are not caring. So the reason I went into the materialism of the West is there's a disconnect emotionally. The disconnect from the family, the disconnect from the community is what enables us to become detached from our world. Now, the technological stuff, which I mentioned briefly in this video, is a massive disconnect. Now, those technocrats will go, oh, no, it's not. It's facilitating sustainability. No, 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 it's really important. We all connect together. It's connectivity. It's Internet of Things. Not when it's got military aspects, or it's come from military applications, or it's designing itself on compliance mentality that you're either with us or against us. You're either in this or you're not. Human suffering results from those who can't comply, and yet we are still in this very confusing space of a democratic society, which governments can't quite get rid of at this point because people believe in it. We have judiciary, we have parliaments. They haven't collapsed that yet. And most definitely there is a domination, a global domination agenda without a doubt. When I went over Scott Ritter's testimony, which is, I will put a link on this video, it's something you should listen to a few times. I'm starting to listen to it again after many years. I recorded it many years ago, over a decade ago. It's totally relevant for the present time. The mentality's still the same. He was the one, and I didn't realise it at the time, I'd forgotten that he had mentioned a global domination agenda through the conservative side of our world. That is a factor, a significant factor in how power works and operates in our world today. We have a silent war going on, which is the very slow imposition of surveillance. It's evident when one looks up at the lights, you can see the cameras, and I'm mentioning this a lot in my videos because I think it's absolutely significant. It's someone, actually I have to laugh, someone said to me, it's surveillance on steroids. I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that was, I said we should do a bumper sticker. Without a doubt, it's over the top surveillance. There is no justification in our society to have cameras every, 50 to 100 metres to track and profile every human being on the planet. Are you kidding me? It's like, no, we don't want that. Although we're going to get it, and we've got it, whether we like it or not, because we're not being democratic. We're not saying, okay, society, we're going to put in these cameras, and this is the reason we're doing it, and this is how we use the data, and it is for your benefit, and this is how it's for your benefit. We can use the card of violence as a dangerous world card, which has been created in our name, and it's been orchestrated by those who are not at peace. The world is a dangerous place. Well, no, it's not. It's not a dangerous place. I went around the world myself, and I found the civilians everywhere I went were lovely. I consider the problems higher up in respect of the projection of power. To control your society enables you to maintain power because then you know what's going on. If anyone becomes a POI, or what they consider to be a person of interest, they will become targeted like I've been. When I was in Canberra just recently, a camera flashed as my car went past. I laughed and said to myself, I think I'm being welcomed to Canberra. And another time I was at a shopping centre, and it was obvious as I came into this square, camera light turned on, big camera turned on, and then it turned off as I passed. It had police on it. And I'd just been to the inquiry on surveillance and press freedom, and I knew I'd been identified at the inquiry because I gave a poem to Christina Keneally, and I saw the guy in the booth behind. He was looking straight at me and he was on the computer, and I knew it was a facial recognition thing. And then you just think, oh, guys, everywhere I go, facial recognition. Duk, duk, duk. You don't even know if the analysis they've done on you is correct. Now, in my case, because I've had quite a history, I've met with lots of people who are very high profiled, and I would actually say that it seems to have been destiny. I've just found myself connecting this way. There's not even really been any plan associated with it other than curiosity and seeker of truth. And then you've got an analyst sitting there going, oh, okay, this is what she's about. She's this and that. And can I access that? Well, I've put in freedom of information requests for the government, and it's taken a year. I'm still trying to get one from Centrelink. So I don't know if ASIO will give me one. I might try. But again, this is the nature of building up this mindset of war, this mindset of the enemy, this idea of full spectrum dominance in order to control the whole spectrum in order to get what you want. It's this selfishness, harking back to that materialist society where all our identity, all our self-worth comes down to that economic value. Anything outside of that is of no value and is of no worth, therefore it's expendable. That's the mentality, and it's a pathological mentality that disconnects emotionally from its humanity. And when that happens, that's when the society is actually in danger, because there's no feeling for that other. And the whole point of that nurturing, that emotional feeling, is to create a natural stability in that society. When people feel their needs are met, when people feel loved, when people feel they belong, when people are engaged in activities, they're enjoying life, working together can be such a joy. And we really do enjoy each other as people. I mean, when you meet, even through this experiences with Guantanamo and what have you, people are learning about other people, even in the darkest of places. They're also learning about themselves. So we're all on journeys, and it's almost like there's a polarity. On one side, we've got those who care nothing. This is your detached, pathological psychopath, if you like. And then we've got on the far end of that spectrum, the really emotional, deep, empathetic people who feel everyone. And the rest of the society oscillates between those two. We also have moments where we're one of those two, depending on what circumstances have arisen. But for homeostasis and harmony in a society, you have to create the conditions for non-violence, which is a nurturing, secure, positively affirming, free society, because people are wired in the way that they're always seeking to maximise their self-interest. And that might sound selfish, but it's actually, we only know who we are. We're in our own lives, and so we go out and we try and meet those needs. Now, Scott Ritter said a very interesting thing in that lecture that I've been revisiting. He talked about the governments, the military, etc., creating these scenarios in respect of the addiction of the public to those goods. So this is where the public creates demand for IT products, it creates demand for cars, demand for housing, demand for food, demand for the latest this, that and the other. These are the addictions to those things, and that's been the economic system that has been pushed along by marketers and market analysts like myself. I've been part of this as well. And I have questioned myself on the research I've done, which has enabled an advertiser to go and produce more ads in order to capture more people. So I've also been a participant in stimulating that economic growth by giving intelligence, but this is a consumer-based intelligence. So it's quite hard for me now to actually re-engage with the economic system now that I know that my energy has been lent towards something that's actually not causing necessarily a common good. If everybody's getting addicted to things and we're trying to get repeat purchases because livelihoods are based on this, you can see how it's all set up. And obviously businesses are not going to want to lose economic growth. They'll see the enemy in the one who is the protester out the front who's saying your products are causing harm to the environment. They become the enemy. And then we get leaders who will say, we need to shut them down, or they've exhibited some violence, therefore we need to shut them down. In truth, they're going, you're the enemy. And yet it's a self-defeating game. The environment collapses. Where to from there? So these are the power blocks. And as I'm sort of rolling with all of this, you can feel the complexity in it. There's so much going on. But what I know from a peace perspective is that there is underlying all of this an order in the chaos. Order is not the correct word. There is a balance beneath all of this, which is the peace that I work with. It's very grounding when you're at peace. I'm not always at peace. I'm just being totally honest. I'm not always at peace, and I'm not always non-judgmental. Sometimes I sense the enemy in that I don't like someone for a moment, and then I come back to me and I say, it's all about you. What is it within you that's projecting onto them? So I use my techniques all the time to bring myself back into balance and harmony with other humans. It's a discipline, not unlike the military. I have to be hard on the problem within me if I'm to be a peacemaker. I also have to be forgiving of me where I've not lived up to what I know to be my higher potential. There has to be truth in this. So those who are seeking to suppress truth, trying to divert truth, trying to confuse truth, are in no way serving humanity. But then I would look upon them and say, they're not ready to accept the truth right now. They're in denial. And this is the big one. This is the big one that keeps the myths of greatness alive, that keeps the myths of I have to be a winner alive. These are all lies. The winning-losing scenario is to lose is not a diminishment, to win is not some accolade. They're just experiences. But we feel power when we win and we feel powerless when we lose, and that's what we're avoiding, is the powerlessness. So underneath all of these labels, all of these narratives, all of these oppositional sides, underneath all of that is the fear of powerlessness. And that powerlessness comes from disconnect from our true nature. Our true nature is spiritual. Religions can be heaped upon that, on top of that spirituality, and I'm talking innate spirit that you're born with into this world. And that spirit is not bodied. It's the spirit of the human being. It's the spirit of the horse. It's the spirit of nature. It's the feeling of life. It's the vibrancy all around us. That spirit is imbued in everything, and it doesn't have an ideology. We place an ideology on top of it in order to make sense of this spiritual feeling that we have, which is what gives us this energy, this diversity, this fascination, this passion for life. When I pass away, my spirit leaves the body and there's just a shell there. So what you're hearing on this video is a spirit moving through me. And when you speak back to me, it's your spirit moving through you. When you're really honest, you're tapping straight into it. This is the soul in all of us. So when we disconnect from truth, that's why it looks like people can be soulless, because they're not in alignment with the truth. They've been mind controlled or brainwashed into ways of thinking that are unquestioned. And the minute you get unquestioned, you know it's mind control. Because when you're not trying to control another mind, you're happy for them to be freely expressing. that free expression is allowing the spirit to speak through the person. And I'm not talking channeling for those. My mind can go lateral because I know people who channel, and that's a whole other story in itself. And how accurate is that as well depends on who's sending the message or who's receiving and how well they communicate it. So again, those religions on top of that, like the cake, we've got the religion of Christianity, the religion of Islam, we've got the religion of Taoism, the religion of Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, there's segments of all those religions. There'd be more religions out there than we can even imagine. And then we've got indigenous dream times, the wisdom of the Indians, the Brazilian Indians, the Amazonian Indians, and they've got a whole spiritual story around their stuff. So we've got a whole heap of people all coming at life in a whole different way. Some believing they're absolutely right, others believing, I'm open to it all. And again, that diversity from one side of the spectrum to the other is there in front of you. When you're open-minded, you accept all of it as the diversity of life. When you're rigid and closed-minded and your way is the only way, you shut off all those possibilities. And you're in denial of the humanity that's right around you. The way I used to teach it when I was teaching peace was the blind spot test, where you have 2 dots on a card. I used to get the kids to cover one eye, look at the card, and there's 2 dots on the card. What they'll notice is one of the dots disappearing. And what I say to the kids is that's when we think we're right, we can't see the other side. When we keep on with narratives of the enemy, that enemy is bad, is evil. Evil's a good one. That's a really good one because when they're the evil other, and Scott Ritter talked about that, and I again recommend you have a listen to what he had to say, that once that evil other is there, they have to be destroyed. Now, that's not democracy. That's war, and war has been given a special privilege because it's been seen as defence of a country. Is that so? Or are we in endless wars that are now hooked to industry very strongly in respect of oil and whatever commodity that they're after? Who are these ones driving that? Who are the ones creating the conflict? Are they the combatants? That's a really critical question. Who is creating the disruption to humanity and calling it in the public benefit? As I said in the beginning of this, I didn't actually use the statistic, but 90% of fatalities are civilian. They get caught up in these conflicts. And that's why I'm doing this video, because innocent people get incarcerated, innocent people get killed in the name of an enemy when there is none. Now I'm just going to go into why there is no enemy. And in the next video, I'll start talking about these very important issues because we have choices and the world is splitting without a doubt. We're either going to go down a pathway of self-destruction where the enemy we just keep projecting out the same image of the enemy and we find it in other places. For the moment, it's the Middle East. It'll find itself China is another enemy. And of course, those others are also creating enemies within their own cultures. The Uyghurs are enemies. The minorities in the Middle East are enemies. Then we've got the schisms of religion, Christian versus Muslim, playing out there. We've got all sorts of mythical stuff in and around this. And I won't go into that. But let's just say a lot of confusion, because all violence is coming out of confusion. It's a call for help. So going back to that evil other, the minute we say to someone, you're possessed, you're this, you're that, we're creating a situation where that person's been tarnished, demonized, put down, weakened, so that the bigger group will turn against them and they won't be a threat. That's the traditional way of getting rid of an enemy. So what we have seen is people being poisoned also. That's happened. We've heard the stories of people being removed because they're saying things that others don't want to hear. And I'm here to say, as a peacemaker, until you hear it, you won't heal. The universe, the life, is bringing to you, to your feet, the very thing you need to hear. If it's not in front of you, you don't need to hear it. If life has brought it to you, you need to hear it. And I'm going to now move into a metaphysical state of peacemaking. It's come to you at your beckoning from a higher level. Now people go, what? That's a load of crock. We're all spiritual, remember I told you. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience, definitely. Without doubt. I've seen a ghost, an apparition, no physical body. I saw them, and I had someone with me who saw the same thing. So no, it wasn't my imagination. A lot of people have talked about it. So when you start to move into the metaphysical, okay, there's more to life than what we see. We don't end at death. We go on. Oh, we're here to live out a journey. What's that journey about? Some might say, well, karma happens. You meet these people for a reason. You go through this war zone because you have to learn something about yourself. And I feel to drop in something that actually has just come to me now. Wonderful, wonderful film, Hackshaw. And I'll put a link to that film as well on this. Now, this guy, I didn't see the whole film, but I have seen it before, and I saw the end of it a few nights ago. Now, he was an American guy, joined the military, but he didn't want to take up arms. And he got bullied badly by his platoon. They all beat him up. Apparently his father, he'd come from a history of military people, and his father, because they were going to try and get him discharged, and his father intervened with someone who was high up, and he was reinstated. He was able to stay in the military. Now, he was training as a medic. He was a lifesaver. Now, we say we're doing these things in order for a greater good to occur, defending the people, saving the people. Well, this guy was literally in that mould. So, to their amazement, when they were confronting the enemy, and it was the Japanese they were fighting, they were on top of, there was the theatre of war playing out, so bullets going everywhere. I sit myself in with my eyes closed in the situation and just go, how would you be? As I stand in the shoes of the poor soldiers. Terrifying. Could be dead at any minute. Facing death. Incredible. Anyway, this guy, he saved 100 men. He literally dragged them to the cliff, and he lowered them all down. His hands were bleeding in the end. And he risked so much, and it was because he was a person of faith. Now let's bring that in. He was truly faithful, which means he believed in God. He believed in God with his heart and soul, and he had his Bible with him. So he was a Christian, okay? Now, the message in this is not about the religion. It was about his belief in God, because he said, God, help me get one more. And he'd go back into the firing line, confronting all those bullets, not shooting back, but saving. He even saved 2 Japanese soldiers. I love that. I think they killed them. But he was demonstrating humanity, the saving of life. It was the most courageous. And in fact, his platoon commander, who had been probably the worst to him, really hurt him, really beat him up. He was filled with respect for him when he saved his life. He said, we didn't know you. Now I'm feeling like tears coming to me now. It's like he thought he was his enemy. Inside his platoon was the enemy created, and they all got together like a group of bullies and beat the crap out of him. The war was playing out because he was different. He didn't comply. He didn't do as he was told. He did not. He was not a man, because that association which is normalized is to defend your country, you have to kill other people, and this is the right way. He was saying, I can't do it, can't pick up arms. But this commander, he said, you are probably the bravest man I've ever met. He was a pacifist. Now, this guy wasn't going around the group trying to indoctrinate them with his religion and force them all to believe in it. But you know what they all did? Before they went into that next wave of conflict, they would not go until he prayed for them. And it was their belief in him, in his faith in this higher power. He wasn't speaking the words out loud. He was just praying for them, their safety. He was trusting that God existed. And in the work I'm doing as a peacemaker and homeless and all the rest of it, because I'm confronting my own challenges too. And when I write to people and tell the truth to people, I'm also in that situation where I have to say, I have to trust in a higher power. I don't have a religion per se that I cleave to, because I was not raised with religion. And I've not felt that I want to believe in a book. I want to actually feel God directly, and I do. And I'll tell you how I feel it. I feel it as unconditional love. I don't need to have a narrative around that. You either feel it or you don't. Feelings do not need words. You just feel the love for the other. And when you do, you know that that's the spirit within you. They call it Namaste in India. Namaste, the God in me connects with the God in you. This is the real meeting between people. When something real happens between you, when you fall in love, that's the same thing. You're actually feeling the spirit of humanity. Now imagine that situation of that film in Hackshaw was called. So check it out. Imagine if we were able to see that in the enemy, that they're human just like us. They have a different way of expressing who they are. But they are also confronting fear when that opposing group, whether it's an armed group, whether it's a military group, doesn't really matter, whoever that group is that you're confronting, they're also going through great fear. They're also being ordered to go forward because there are others above them who have an agenda. And in innocence, they're going forward believing that they're doing a good thing. Some of them like it too, so I won't gloss over it. When you get into, Scott Ritter made it very clear that war is the most disgusting thing you can imagine because it's men's brutality to man. And the same applies in these camps like Guantanamo Bay where we're being cruel. The Gulag, when I was over in, where was I? Egypt, there were incarceration places, there are internment camps all over the world, there are jails where people are being held and brutalised. So man's inhumanity to man. And going back to the beginning of this video, I talked about families, the breakdown of the family. All these things link because we disconnect from one another. We don't know the importance of that love toward one another because the spirit is loving. The nature of the human being is loving. That's why in that film, The Men That Stare at Goats, George Clooney played a role in that, where that commander in that military unit, before he formed this New Age type, I don't know if it's really New Age, but he studied the New Age. He formed a unit, New Earth Army, and it was based on a completely different way of seeing war. It was a prevention of war. And when he dropped out of that helicopter in Vietnam and he was with new recruits, none of them could shoot the other side because it wasn't their nature. They actually shot over their heads. Now, I've known a soldier who told me the same thing, that he did not shoot one person, he shot over their heads because it wasn't his nature to do it. He saw their mothers' faces and their faces. So when you have a very strong sense of family, you're you're not going to be able to attack that other. And it doesn't mean you're a coward. It means you're responding to your humanity within. When that commander in Vietnam, this is the men that stare at goats, was hit, he was stunned, because they shot over their heads. He was a seasoned soldier. He was shocked. He stood there and he got shot by one Viet Cong. They shot him. And there he is lying down. And in the film, I'll never forget it, he sees an image of an Asian woman over his head. The gentleness is the strength. Now, I got a feeling of China then. This is a message to you. The gentleness is the strength. Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching. Stay below. And that's not concealment, that's not hiding. It's staying below ego. It's humility. The wisdom of humility, where there's nothing to defend because there's no ego sitting there. When you connect with the spiritual side of your life, which is not really a side, it's actually who you are, we block it, is what we really do. It's always with you. And you'll have moments when you'll feel it. When you see your child's eyes and you feel the love for the child, that's when you're feeling it. That's the spirit in you responding to the spirit in the other whom you love. Because love, that's why love is always at the centre of all of these things. It's no mistake. It's who we are. And yet we do things in the name of God and we call that honour. It's not. Love does not destroy another life. It's not permissible. When you're truly in alignment with love, there's no way you can hurt another. I can't. That's why my videos are the way they are. I don't name names. Sometimes I bring names in, but my intention is never to harm anyone because they are me. If I was taught the same way, I'd be them. I can create a space around that, and that's where I can't have an enemy. There is no enemy. Although they could look at me as one, but that's their problem. They have to work on that, if peace is what they want. Not everybody wants peace. Some people get off on the drama, they like it. They get off on the power, they're consumed by it. Until there comes a point where a reality check comes in and they actually get confronted with the inhumanity. That can be a moment of great change in their lives. But until that happens, people can typically move unconsciously from one disaster to another, believing that they're right. I've always said that the greatest intelligence is that I could be wrong. Any good intelligence analyst should be able to, well, I don't know if they do, but if you're seeking for truth, they probably don't, because you're tending to go down a track of gathering data about someone to profile them, but there's an agenda behind it. But let's just say for those who are really interested in truth, you have to go with the bigger picture, and you have to really question the thoughts that are narratives that have been indoctrinated into you. Because when we strip it all back, we're just human beings all trying to get along, not understanding each other. But the intention there is that our true nature is to connect with one another. That's why the internet's gone off so well. The iPhones, the communication, is because we are natural communicators. We want to connect with our people. We don't want our data gathered in order to have advertising thrown up in our faces to brainwash us into buying something and continuing the juggernaut of economic growth, the addiction, which is sinking the planet ultimately. That's why I said in the beginning it's a zero-sum game. So somehow we have to snap out of this mesmerized narrative that we've been trained into, because no one's going to win in the end. Truth has to become a form of reconciliation with one another. That's why we had the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. The judiciary must not have donations, must not have financial interests involved, must not have powerful people appointing them. They have to be neutral in order for truth to be seen so that we can solve the problem. When truth is suppressed, it's fearful people who do not want their reputations destroyed, who are frightened of jail. They put their own self-interest ahead of others. The whistleblowers put others ahead of their own self-interest. That's the mirror there. So to restore peace, truth has to be told, and it will be. And it is being told. As I've said in a previous video, what I see is the wall, and I see a lot of cracks forming in it. And that is the people awakening. Now, when that wall collapses, that means people wake up to what's been done in their name. And in actual fact, we need preparation for that form of disruption so that we respond to it non-violently. We have truth and reconciliation with each other, and then we start to formulate a new worldview, one that's sustainable, one that honours freedom, doesn't suppress it for the few. We need to come into harmony with our true nature in order to rebalance or recalibrate with the planet itself. Inner peace is the solution to external climatic change. People will go, well, how can that be true? Because we're the spirit of things. Nature is a spirit of things. That's where we join. That's where we meet. That's why when we go into nature, we feel peace, because nature is peace. We're the disruptor of it. We've been a massive disruptor of it. And we've called it progress. It's actually egress. We're going backwards. Because the rights are being dismantled, because democracies are changing into more authoritarian shapes, that's a sign of egress, going backwards. The evolution of humanity is always about freedom and expanding those freedoms. Because as we expand freedoms, our creativity expands, the potential of humanity expands. We reach our full potential. And then we go into vistas that are endless. So from that base of powerlessness that I've talked about, we are limiting our potential, and we're limiting the potential of other cultures on the planet. When we come out as might is right, or I am right, you are wrong, we are limiting that. God's creation came through my mind then, so I'll just say it. We're limiting that creation. And I'm saying that because there are religious extremes who are controlling this whole game. And then there are those who are not of a religious persuasion but are more involved in full spectrum dominance, above that even. So I'm just going to finish this now with a bit of silence. We are all one. When we're fighting, it's the left hand fighting against the right hand on the same body. We're all the one body. It's like cells in the body. You know, the cancer is when we get out of control, just keep replicating things that are not serving us. It's toxic. Cancer comes from toxic, whatever, can come from toxic thoughts, things that are out of balance with the body. The economic system is out of balance with the body of the nature because it's got infinite growth and we make money out of more and more widgets produced. The IT stuff they're seeing it as sustainable because it's digital, and it's electromagnetic. But we've got issues with the 5G in respect of health effects and the fact that it can be weaponized. Targeting can happen. We've also got compliance mentalities being trained into people through access and no access to websites, having all these terms and conditions which no one reads, and using that as a form of consent. We are one. The internet, in many respects, is a possible model of that oneness, but it would have to be a open source type environment where there's no advertising, no business interests in it. It would have to be a public domain for it to work as a model of the oneness, which is the mirror of nature, which is nature. Some might be able to leave the planet if things all collapse here. And where do you go? You go to an inhospitable environment. I don't know if there's another planet similar to Earth. There might be. But what happens to the 6 billion souls here on the planet? We have an interest in not only surviving but thriving. We want to live in peace and harmony and happiness. We want to do it differently. We have to come into a higher consciousness now, where all these zero-sum games, they play out and peter out because they don't work. It's really more about what serves you and what does not. Does violence serve us? Well, no, it doesn't. We learn from it though. So maybe I'm being honest here, see? Yeah, it can serve us on some level as learning not to go there. Valuing peace can come from it. The insanity we can easily fall into when we don't question our thinking and we create enemies. So what serves us, what does not? Well, homeostasis serves us. Sustainability serves us. Self-determination serves us. True democracy serves us if we have a voice that's heard and acted upon. Values serve us. Clean air, clean water, clean soil, abundant topsoil. Oceans clean with fish life, with marine life, all in balance. Ice caps not melting serves us. It's not a question of jumping off into a lifeboat organisation and saving the few. We don't want a Noah situation here where you just simply save those few. From a spiritual level, everybody's accountable. And that's not, in my worldview, a punishment thing. It means that what you put out comes back. When we pass over, we get to experience our impact on others. That's come through my own research. I found that out, that we actually do have our life flash before our eyes when we die. We are shown moments out of our lives, things that we'd forgotten. They come into full vision, as if you're there. It happens very, very fast, apparently, because on the other side there's no physical body, you see. So everything's immediate. You suddenly realise your behaviour. You also realise what everyone else thought of you. Some of us will be going, well, I don't know if I really want to know what they thought. I'm putting my gloves on if you're wondering what I'm doing. Hands are getting cold. I feel to share with you the tunnel. Isn't it funny? I'm going over an hour, I know that, but that's not unusual with me. What I've been told is people go down, well, one told me he went down a barrel. I've been told by others they go down a very fast tunnel. Some of them have been above their bodies looking down. Some of them felt connection to their bodies, some of them didn't. Some of them got really frightened when they went out of their body. I went, oh my God. Some people were able to just go out of their body in human life. That was a woman I met who did that. But what I've been told is, in one instance, someone said that they went towards the light, they heard a voice. So this is going back to the guy, Hackshaw, his faith. This is the reality of it. They often go towards a light being. Now, some of them see them in the image of people they've believed in. But if we were to interview people right across the world about going towards the light and who was the being that they saw, it would vary. Because the other side tends to comfort us when we come, and it will present images that we feel familiar with. We also have family meet us, so you don't separate from your family. So even those people we've lost in war and that, they live on. So may this give some healing to those who've lost people. The stories I was told, one of them said that the love was indescribable that they experienced from this light source. Others talked about the flashing of images of their life, everything that went just so fast, but from all angles. So not just from your own perspective, but from other people's perspectives that you were not able to see in this life. Some saw mist, like a heavenly type mist, I guess, but I think it was more luminous. It was luminous. I've often heard that. So luminous grass, luminous, things look like the earth, but they're like luminous, filled with light. Others definitely, well, if not all, meet with their mothers and their fathers, people that they've loved, even dogs. Their favourite dog comes running up. It's really very beautiful. It's been said that that film Dreams That Come, that Robin Williams was in, What Dreams May Come, I think it was called. It's been stated in a channeling, actually, that's a very probably proximal, similar to what it's like on the other side. Whatever you think about, you bring about, is what the law of attraction talks about, but on the other side, it's the same thing. So if you believe you deserve to go down to this dark place, you go there. But the moment you decide you don't want to, come up, because you've got free will. We were given free will. And this is why democracy is important on the planet. It's about free will. It's about people going about their business doing what they feel inspired to do. It's not about a corporate paradigm controlling our lives and sinking the ship, because that's what's happening. By all means, we could have economic activity, but it's got to be in harmony with the planet. You haven't been able to stop business as usual. Okay, so I'll just come back into the heavenly space. I don't even know if it's called heaven. Let me go still for a minute and get more sense of it. The first thought I got was the life is the dream. This is the real world, is on the other side. So we're not to take it all too seriously, but obviously we're going to clash it up with each other while we're here. We live on. So this is part of our journey. Well, my feeling is like it's a lot of fun and a lot of laughter. It's taking all that dark energy off us, and it's expansive. Whatever you want, you get. So those desires that we've had on, while we're living this life, are also on the other side too. And we've been all of it. I've been my enemy. That's why I say you are me too. The higher perspective is that you are me, literally, because we're all the spirit, you see, the one spirit that moves through all of us. That's really what it's about, truly. Some of you won't believe me, but that's okay. You can just ride me off. I'm sure I've been ridden off by a lot of people. I've also been, heard by a lot too, because they know I'm telling the truth. I sometimes say in my videos, your happy destiny is unavoidable. I really mean it. That happy destiny is when you pass over, you come into a full state of joy. This is full spectrum joy, not dominance. Dominance has fear in it. There's no dominance on the other side. It is the light. Because when you're not in your body, what's to fear? You can't be killed, can you? Think about it. You know, you won't starve because you don't need food. I keep feeling to go back to Hackshaw, the guy that had the faith, who was in the war zone, who saved all those people. And I remember when I watched that, I thought of all the families that they had, because it was a true story. So they went on, and he would have actually impacted millions of lives through that 100. Because all of us, in the course of a lifetime, we touch and affect millions of people and we don't even know it. And so people die alone going, oh, I'm a nothing and I'm a nobody. Well, no, you are most definitely a something and a somebody, without doubt. Even in your misery, even if you're homeless, or even if you're the CEO of a company, who cares? It's like whatever state of experience you're in, you're impacting others, because there's a contrast happening around you. And we're all here to remember who we are. Life is evoking that memory. So yes, you can have a spiritual experience in the middle of an absolutely horrific conflict. And even those orchestrating all the conflicts on the planet are awakening us too. So there is no enemy even in them. They're playing out what they believe is right for them. They'd have to be disconnected emotionally to do what they're doing. But that inhumanity is what's inspiring the re-energization of humanity, because it's hardwired into us. It's not even, I mean, that's biologically hardwired, but I'm talking DNA level. But we're also spiritual beings, which I've said in other videos, because some want to shut us down, and transhumanism wants to make us half mechanical, because they want an ordered, it's almost like a neat, ordered, automated world that shuts down all those spontaneous anythings, which is the feminine. They want to create that control so it goes like clockwork, because that's how they think in the left brain. They see the world as automated. That's their world. It's compartmentalized. In the feminine, when the feminine comes together with the masculine, the spontaneously, the frivolity, the emotive, the sensual comes into light, to enlighten as they come together. She takes on some of the logic, he takes on some of the creativity, nurturing, humanity, which is in both. Both males and females have the feminine and masculine within. That's why some men who are very effeminate have very strong feminine side. Some women have a strong masculine side. So again, there's no hard and fast rules in this. I'm just saying that the bringing together of these two brings together balance. It's a balance. The transhumanism, the automation, the IT, the disruption, the surveillance, the control is coming from the left brain, which is in all of us when it dominates. So the spectrum dominance is really about the left brain dominating. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths is all part of that. When it becomes the only way, that then becomes the shutting down of alternative views, because the fear is such that they want this to turn out this way because there's power in it. And yet nature would say, no, bring in the other viewpoint to rebalance. Nature doesn't even say no. Nature just naturally rebalances, because it feels the disruption, feels the imbalance. It comes to balance together. Homeostasis is the power here. Balance. It's the center point of peace, which is our true nature. It's not an idealistic anything. When you go home to the real world, which is on the other side, you will be in states of joy that you can't even imagine. You'll laugh at the human journey and you'll realise that we're quite primitive in actual fact while we're still warring away there. But even that's a leading edge in itself, because those contrasts are pushing us to expand who we are, to get better, to create a better world. So each side is creating the other. It's not possible for one side to exist only. That's why I said it can't work. From a natural point of view, it can't. Nature will always rebalance, despite higher, or I don't even like the word higher, other interests, despite other factors, I'll call it. Nature is nature. So with that, I've done a really long one. I never know where it's going to go until I do it. That's the thing about no control. And when I live in the freedom like this, all I can do is give to you, because I don't get paid for this. This is a fully giving, and it's coming from love within me, the spirit of me, the spirit of you, because we create each other. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Send you peace, love, and the reality that there is no enemy. Only fear make it so. Love is the answer without a doubt. And we are all going home. Going to pack up our things and we're off. Take care. Bye.